Before the lightning strikes, before the blacklists, before the screams that weren't acting, Mel Gibson made a choice that Hollywood begged him not to. Now, decades later and nearing the end of his life, he's finally admitting why. This wasn't just a film, it was a reckoning. And what happened behind the scenes? That's the part no one's dared to say out loud, until now.
The film Hollywood was afraid to touch. Hollywood didn't just hesitate on the Passion of the Christ, it flinched hard. By the late 1990s, Mel Gibson was one of the most bankable stars on the planet. That's what makes what happened next so strange. Studio after studio heard the pitch and walked away. Not because of budgets, not because of scheduling, but because the film itself scared them. An R-rated religious film spoken entirely in Aramaic and Latin. No English safety net, no softened violence, no heroic gloss. Executives reportedly told Gibson audiences wouldn't sit through subtitles, wouldn't tolerate brutality, and definitely wouldn't embrace a story that refused to modernize itself. In Hollywood terms, it was unmarketable. In Mel's words, it was non-negotiable. Here's the part people forget. Gibson wasn't chasing controversy, he was chasing accuracy. He insisted Jesus wouldn't sound American, Romans wouldn't speak English, pain wouldn't be symbolic, it would be physical, exhausting, uncomfortable, the kind of discomfort studios spend millions trying to avoid. And it cut the process down of what would normally we kind of guesstimated would have been an 8-hour makeup down to about a 2-hour makeup. And that refusal created a bizarre situation. One of the biggest stars in the world couldn't get a movie made, not because it was small, but because it was too honest. So Mel did something almost unheard of. He wrote the check himself. Roughly $30 million to shoot it, another $15 million to market it. No studio shield, no shared blame. If it failed on him alone. Some insiders later admitted the fear wasn't just financial, it was cultural. The film didn't fit modern storytelling rules. It didn't reassure the audience. It didn't explain itself. It demanded endurance. That made executives uneasy. And here's where the theories start creeping in. Some believe Hollywood wasn't afraid of the violence at all, but of the reaction. That a film this raw, this unapologetic, might provoke something they couldn't control. Not outrage, reflection. Others say it challenged the industry's unspoken rule. Never let faith feel dangerous. Because the Passion wasn't inspirational in the traditional sense, it was confrontational. It asked a question without saying it out loud. What if this actually happened like this? And once that question was asked, Mel couldn't take it back, even when every door closed. Which raises the next mystery. Why was he so determined to make it, even when it cost him everything?
The risk that turned into a reckoning. When Mel Gibson bet his own money on the Passion of the Christ, it wasn't just a financial gamble. It felt personal, almost reckless. And the people around him noticed something unsettling. He wasn't acting like a producer chasing profit. He was acting like someone who believed backing out wasn't an option. At the time, Mel openly admitted he wasn't in a good place. Fame hadn't fixed him. Awards hadn't calmed him. He spoke later about addiction, inner chaos, and a growing sense that something in his life was off balance.
I mean, we're all like shadowed out, and we've kind of learned on the others, and he's just getting the benefit of all the mistakes we made, and they all love it. And then this story took hold, not loudly, quietly, the kind of idea that doesn't let go. He didn't frame the film as entertainment, he framed it as obedience. That's where things get interesting, because once production began, the set itself started gaining a reputation, not for chaos, for heaviness. Crew members described a strange emotional weight. Seasoned professionals, people who'd worked war films, horror films, said this felt different. Hard to explain, harder to ignore. Then came the incidents everyone still talks about. Jim Caviezel, playing Jesus, was struck by lightning during filming. Not near him, on him. He survived, but later required major heart surgeries.
It was probably more like 3 seconds. It felt like 5, but was probably less than that. And then boom. The assistant director was also struck, twice on the same production. Statistically possible, sure, but unsettling enough that people still whisper about it. Caviezel suffered hypothermia, a dislocated shoulder, a deep whip wound when a practical effect went wrong. Some of the screams in the final cut weren't acting, they were real. And Mel, he'd step away from the camera during the most violent scenes, not to direct, to pray. Here's the fun fact most people miss. The film wasn't marketed traditionally at all. No flashy premieres, no late-night circuits. Instead, Gibson screened it privately for church leaders, pastors, religious groups. Word spread underground. By the time Hollywood realized what was happening, it was too late. Opening day shattered expectations. Week after week, audiences kept coming. The film didn't just succeed, it rewrote the rules. But success came with a price: accusations, backlash, cultural firestorms, and eventually Mel's own public collapse just a few years later.
Even after the cameras stopped rolling, the Passion of the Christ didn't let go of the people who made it. And that's where things get really strange. Because for a film that broke every box office rule, the cast and crew didn't exactly ride a wave of fame. In fact, many of them disappeared. Let's start with Jim Caviezel, the man who played Jesus. Before The Passion, he was on a steady rise. Serious dramas, major supporting roles, respect from Hollywood. But after this film, something shifted. Roles dried up, projects stalled, and whispers started swirling. Was he blacklisted? Caviezel himself later admitted that offers vanished overnight. Big studios, big directors, gone. Some people claimed it was because he was too religious. Others said it had nothing to do with faith, but everything to do with fear. Fear that his face, forever linked to Christ's torment, was too much for audiences to separate, or maybe for the industry itself to deal with. But it wasn't just Caviezel. Other actors who appeared in the film stepped into a bizarre silence. Crew members declined interviews. Background actors turned down behind-the-scenes specials. And when journalists tried to dig deeper, they hit a wall. People would simply say, "I don't want to talk about it." No drama, no scandal, just silence. One of the strangest cases was Luca Lionello, the Italian actor who played Judas. Before the movie, he was a self-described atheist, but after filming, he converted to Christianity. According to some reports, he described the role as emotionally overwhelming, something that cracked something open inside him. That wasn't an isolated story. Several people on set, extras, assistants, even makeup artists, began attending Bible studies or requested baptisms while production was still ongoing. One story that floated through the press had a background actor collapse during a crucifixion scene, not from heat exhaustion, but from what he called spiritual pressure. And the weirdest part? These weren't people prone to drama. Many had worked on major sets for years, war films, horror flicks, action franchises. Yet this movie left them shaken in a way no explosion or stunt ever had. The cameras stopped, the trailers packed up, the set in Mata emptied. But for many who worked on The Passion of the Christ, something didn't leave with them. Because after filming wrapped, a new phenomenon began to surface. Dreams. Vivid, disturbing, and relentless. Cast and crew began quietly admitting to a strange string of recurring nightmares. These weren't your average post-production stress dreams. They were specific, visceral, often biblical in tone, sometimes violent, and eerily similar across different people who hadn't spoken since leaving Italy. One set technician told a friend that after he got home, he kept waking up at exactly 3 a.m., the traditional hour associated with Christ's death, heart racing, convinced someone was standing in his room. He wasn't religious, he didn't believe in spirits, but he began sleeping with the lights on. Another source close to the costume department said they began having dreams of ancient languages, Aramaic and Latin phrases they didn't speak or understand being whispered in their ear. One of them later Googled the phrases and found them to be actual liturgical lines used in funeral rites. Even Jim Caviezel later admitted in a Christian radio interview that long after production ended, he would wake up sweating, feeling like he was still carrying the cross. He said it was more than muscle memory. It was something he felt beneath his skin. And then came the stories of objects being taken home from the set, props, costume fragments, even stones from the location that seemed to carry a weight no one could explain. One crew member claimed the rosary they had worn during the entire shoot went missing after they returned home and showed up weeks later at their front door, soaking wet on a sunny day. The most chilling part, no one wanted to talk about it publicly. These weren't attention-seeking stories. They were whispers, anecdotes traded cautiously between people who didn't want to be seen as unhinged. Some believed the film had become a spiritual lightning rod, pulling energy from a story too sacred and too raw to be dramatized without consequence.
Was it the intensity of the material? Was it the emotional toll of reliving ancient trauma? Or did the film tap into something deeper, something not just watched, but felt long after the credits rolled?
Just when everyone thought The Passion of the Christ had said everything it could, Mel Gibson revealed he wasn't done. That's right, there's a sequel, and not just a quiet follow-up. According to Gibson, it's going to be the biggest film in world history. His words, not ours. And here's the part no one saw coming. The Passion of the Christ, Resurrection, has been in secret development for years, quietly, obsessively, off the radar. Why? Because Gibson believes this one isn't just a film, it's a spiritual experience. Insiders claim the sequel doesn't simply pick up after the crucifixion, it dives headfirst into the 3 days between death and resurrection, a part of scripture rarely dramatized in full. Think about that. The descent into hell, the cosmic battle between light and darkness, the moment all of creation held its breath. And once again, Gibson isn't holding back. He's reportedly studying ancient texts, extra-biblical writings, and even apocryphal sources to explore what actually could have happened in that realm beyond the physical. In short, he wants to film what no one's dared to put on screen. And guess who's returning? Jim Caviezel. Even after all the pain, the backlash, the career fallout, he's back, and he said the sequel will make the original look like a walk in the park. That's not an exaggeration, that's a warning. Caviezel has dropped cryptic hints about spiritual warfare, about strange delays, about forces trying to stop this film from ever reaching theaters. In interviews, he's called the script powerful and controversial. And Mel, he said he's approaching the project with fear and trembling. One major twist, the sequel reportedly blends real-time resurrection scenes with visions, flashbacks, and spiritual encounters unlike anything audiences have seen before. And if the first film already shook people's faith to the core, this one might ignite it or challenge it even more. But here's the wild part. Hollywood still wants no part of it. The sequel, like its predecessor, has struggled to find studio backing. Too risky, too controversial, too sacred. So Gibson's doing it again. Independent financing, private production, and total control. And that leads to the most haunting question of all. If the first film brought lightning, blood, and silence, what's going to happen this time?